Well, hello everyone from the Life First Podcast. I'm Andrew. Hi there. I'm behind this all along. You didn't know it. And we also have Emmy. Where's Emmy? Oh, there's Emmy. we got Rue. Where could Rue be? Boom! There's Rue. And finally, last but not least, there is a Taylor. Where's the Taylor? Oh!
Awesome.
Yeah, we definitely practiced that for sure. Hey guys, welcome back to the Life First Podcast with me. So we are going to be talking about our GP day here. We'll just get right into it. You guys, if you wanted to see what led up to our training and testing in GP before, as well as like what we did in Vegas as sort of like a vacation, you guys can check out the last episode. But here we are, 1 week later, definitely 1 week later, all of us coming back together to talk about our GP. Glad we wore the same shirts, everybody. I'm really, really happy we coordinated that.
I've been wearing this since last week. I've been taking it off.
Could be true.
I wore this at the GP.
This is peak card game energy.
Yeah. So you guys got to the GP a little differently than me and Tiffany did. Me and Tiffany wanted to sleep in a little bit. How did you guys get to the GP?
I guess I can start. Yeah, we all kind of agreed that we wanted to get there a little early. Maybe like do some trades, look at other people's binders, just like kind of just meet everyone else that was in our playgroup that was there. Like at least Taylor and I, like we wanted to really connect with some of the other North Carolina people before we went, and then like maybe get some key games in because we're kind of we're like the only people that play that format there. So it was like we'll see what happens. Then wanted to get there early for that.
Cool, yeah, and I think you guys were supposed to go on a limo, but did that happen? Did the limo take you there?
It did not. It
wasn't our fault.
We got a black car.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
there was a mix-up with that. So I think we did end up going in like a what kind of car was it? It was a Suburban, wasn't it? Like one of the. So we took a big. It's like a big.
Yeah,
it was
something like that.
It still was, luxury. It definitely was not like
still pretty nice.
Your standard Uber.
Yeah, like frigid air conditioning in the Las Vegas heat.
Yeah. Jimmy was definitely the one who was most upset out of all of us that he couldn't get a limo.
He really wanted that limo for sure.
He was dressed up, ready to roll too. Like,
he was looking fly.
He had a new suit that he had just bought, like literally the day before.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty funny. And then we were able to find our way through all of the muscle mommies and daddies that were at the convention at the same time as us. Which was like they were like, oh, we've got bodybuilder competition. Where do we put the geeks? And put them in the back. They'll be fine. They'll be fine.
As I was like walking down the hallway, I saw like tanning area here, and I was like, "What is going on?" And then like turn the corner, I just see like all these like big dudes and like speedos, and I was like, "Well, I know what I'm doing if I like lose my first 2 rounds. Gonna jump over here get tan."
Yeah. I also think it was pretty funny too because like so Tiffany and I got in, we just didn't know where to go, and we were like looking around lost, right? And there was all these like buff dudes like walking around, right? And then I saw one very normal looking person, and looking back at it, I think it was Brandon. And I've never met him before, and I was like, you look like you watch anime. And he was like, I might. And I was like, where do we go?
Yeah, I felt kind of bad because like, so I had been, these two weren't here for GP1, but it's the same venue. So when we got there, I was like leading them, and I thought I knew where I was going, but it was a different room within the same venue space. And so when we got there and we like showed up to the tanning convention, there was part of me that was like, oh shit, this is the wrong place. Like I have brought them to the wrong place.
Ruined it.
Like I think because I had been there before, it was actually like worse for me because I thought I knew what I was doing until the point we were there.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we all made it in one piece. None of us won the muscle competition, but we all did pretty well in the other competition. So as a recap for anyone who's rewatching this, Emmy, you got 8th place, right?
Yes, I got 8.
Rue 7th, and Taylor, you got 5th, right? Technically.
Yep.
Cool. And then I got 2. So it was a great event. Great. Our team did super well. We got 4 out of the 6 people who came from our team made it to top 8, which was a pretty cool showing. We all managed to do it with different decks too, which is kind of an interesting thing. I thought we would maybe land on a single deck and then try to play that deck, but nope. We did different decks, and we were all very successful with our wide strategies. So let's talk about that a little bit. Which one of you guys want to go first to talk about your deck and all that good stuff?
I think I can probably start because like mine's probably the most standard list. Like, I don't remember how many other Tamas there were, but I'm pretty sure it was like. Do you remember, Taylor? Like how many other Tamas there were?
I think it was like 4 or 5, and I know I was the only Mayu that actually came.
Okay. And then, I mean, obviously you're on Alpha, 1 of 1, right? Whereas, like, I'm on Piruluk, and I think Piruluk had the highest conversion rate to top 16 of any L-Rig with more than 2 players. So, because it was four players in the top 16 were Piruluk players, and there were only 6 Piruluks. So, I feel like, and also my list is very standard. Like, I think comparatively to like Tama and Alfou and even like Nanashi to some extent, Piruluk and Miko definitely have the most like standard, hard, very like rigid lists that are hard to innovate on or have fit tech cards into. So I'd say like honestly, part of me kind of regrets taking Piruluk just because. And you talked a little bit about it, I know, in your talk with, at least, I don't remember if it was in your tier list video or in your interview with Brandon, but you talked a little about, like, you thought that Piruluk was maybe the best deck if piloted perfectly.
Yeah.
And I don't think I agree with that. So because of that, maybe it was a mistake to bring this deck. But I mean, it did well. I felt like and this is what I kept saying, leading up to it, and why I was sticking with it over Miko and Nanashi is like I have really bad luck. Maybe I'm just really bad at shuffling, but like I have insanely bad luck constantly, and so I didn't want to play a deck that was kind of reliant on like a specific top deck at some point in the game in order to swing tempo. What makes Piruluk different from both Miko and Nanashi is that she has the tools to put herself in the lead very early on compared to Miko and Nanashi. Whereas those two kind of rely on big tempo swing turns.
Mm-hmm.
And so Piruluk, you really kind of just get an advantage and then ride that until you win.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't win immediately, Piruluk out of pretty much every deck, I think, is like the most, and maybe Alpha is better, but is the most able to continue chugging along past the early to mid turns because this is a very fast format. But Piruluk can be fast, but you can also continue like getting resources because of save, and you're just running a lot of emergencies, as well as Piruluk's once per game, which just or exceed 4, which just lets you basically full clear at any point that you want. So you're able to continue fighting on turn 5 and turn 6 and even turn 7.
Yeah,
which is why I liked it.
I think I agree with that. I think like basically when we kept playing with each other in testing, the more and more I really embraced the fact that I was like, if I go past turn 4 against Piruluk, I lose. That's when I started having a better chance at winning. But it just felt like that. It felt like no matter what you did to Piruluk, you could maybe kick it down for turns 1 through 4, but then after turn 4, right, if you hit turn 5, it just feels like Piruluk's going to bury you in card advantage no matter what you do.
Yeah. I think save compared to Miko Fan is definitely like the biggest difference between the two decks because Miko Fan is a very much destroy your opponent's resources, whereas save is very much generate your own, right? Like it's +2 cards, it gives you enter, and like you mentioned in the previous episode, the ability to stack your deck in a very specific order with save with so many cards that draw cards such as emergence and extra and save herself is like very powerful. It lets you stack your plays for the mid to late game very consistently, and it gives you just so much good information about what plays you have available too. You're not guessing, and you're not relying on the top 2 cards of your deck every turn in order to win.
Yeah, which Miko really feels like it does that. Even on turn 4, even sometimes turn 3, it feels like that for sure. Just so you guys know, too, as you guys talk about the deck, I have the decks up, and I'm like just highlighting over the cards so you guys don't need to explain what the cards do or anything.
Sure, okay, cool.
Yeah, just visual aid. So, yeah, and so you explained the reasoning why you brought this deck to the GP. Is there any notable rounds that stuck out to you as like being like these were challenging rounds that I managed to find a cool way through, or even like these you could even say these were easy rounds that I did because I did the job and the deck did the job that I needed it to do, and just explain a little bit like how that worked.
Well, I think like the overarching narrative that I learned throughout the games about like the meta itself was, I think 3 of my victories I won immediately following a turn where I made a massive misplay, like game-losing misplay. And it made me realize that like, because I'm playing a blue deck and I've discarded my opponent to 0 cards, it doesn't matter that I'm making those kind of misplays because now my opponent just has to be lucky to kind of break out of it. And they weren't lucky, right? And so I think the first few games that happened, I was like, because my opponents would usually just concede after they see the end result, and I would be like, oh man, I accidentally banged before I levited, which means that their and gets to stay on field now, and it was just like this nightmare because now it's like, knowing my luck, when I extra them, they're going to draw Servant. And then when I enter burn them at the beginning of my turn with Lalaru, they're going to enter charge a green, and I'm going to lose the entire game because of it. And it's like, to me, that's a game-losing misplay. But when you like actually think about it, like, what are the chances that's going to actually happen? And the answer is very, very low, potentially 0. I don't know their deck. I don't know their hand. I don't know what they know about what's still in their deck. So it's like, maybe I was just getting into my own head about that a little bit, and so it was kind of like I want to say round 4 where I played against Altiers, and it was a pair up for me. And Altiers, great guy, great player, and I was able to beat him. That like, it kind of clicked, like, oh, this deck is actually like working, and even though it's relying a little bit on my opponents being unlucky, that's like the whole gist of this metagame is like, it's when you're luckier than your opponent, how much can you push that luck is literally like the name of the game, right?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point there too, because it's like, it's really just like with this metagame too, it's providing yourself the opportunity to have more chances at better luck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Piruluk, I think out of every deck, even Nanashi, who I've definitely come around to being way less like chancy than I kind of originally gave it credit for. I think Piruluk's by far the most consistent deck in being able to set up your plays. But in turn, that's kind of why it's so rigid, is because every card feels so necessary. Like, I know several Piruluks that brought lists that had less than 4 saves, and I'm just like, how do you do that? I understand on the one hand that's like, you're realistically only gonna have 2 turns on level 3, but at the same time, it's like, that card is so necessary to making your game plan consistent and functional that cutting down, like even considering cutting down from 4 was like, no for me. Similar with like emergence, like there are so many lists that are running 3 or even 2 emergence, and I'm just like, I don't know how you do that. I need the consistency so badly.
Yeah, even I, finally, you and Pigeon specifically argued me successfully into putting emergencies in my list, and I was like, okay, yeah, it can screw up my early hands, but outside of that, it's a consistency piece, and like Dishonor sometimes just doesn't really run consistent, right? That's kind of the difference between your deck and the Miko deck too. Is save is a consistency piece, running for emergence is a consistency piece. You just got a lot more consistency that you can run through because of that.
Yep, and I'd say that ends up being a bit of a downside too, because it's just my ability to swing tempo once I'm behind is just not there. My ability to swing tempo versus Miko and Nanashi is just to hope that they somehow can't kill me on turn 4 if I fall behind, which generally, like, those decks are very much able to do that. So that wasn't a great plan.
Yeah, heard. Now for people who are interested in running Piruluk successfully, and you are currently the U.S. top Piruluk player. Uh, what would you say the general game plan is, right? Like I know this might be simple for you, but for some of our viewers, they might want like just an overall simplified breakdown of like here's what you generally do in early game, mid game, late game. What would you say you do with the deck?
Well, I'd say like so. First off, I'd say if you've played a Desona deck, the base level for this deck is pretty similar, right? Like it's if you have firecrackers and wobbles early, you generally will use them to push as much damage as you can on turn 1 and 2. In discard matchups, you kind of want to ignore Pond Turtle entirely. Like you can play it, but you just ignore its effects because your cards in hand are more important than keeping the cards out of your opponent's hand until way later in the game. But otherwise, if you've played discard before, utilizing Pond Turtles and extras in the early game is definitely a strong way to like get that early lead. Like I was talking about earlier, you want that early lead to snowball into a victory. I'd say like the biggest thing to wrap your head around is knowing when it's correct to cast spells before turn 3 and when it isn't. Because you want to make sure that you always have access to the full board wipe when you exceed 4. And what that means is generally, let's just say that you have like 3 spells in hand. If you have 3 spells in hand and you don't draw into any more with like saves or just extras drawing you cards, you're only going to be able to cast 3 plus the 1 from your auto. That's only going to be a total of minus 16k divided between several Signy. And what's especially annoying is that there's a lot of 10k Signy in this format where you have to commit a third extra trigger of your Exceed 4 to kill them, which is really annoying. And it oftentimes means that you realistically need to be able to cast like 6 spells in a single turn to guarantee that full clear. But identifying like, is this a matchup where I want to save X Crossfire and then I only have to worry about 2 Signy on my OPG turn, or identifying like, I'm just going to ignore my OPG entirely. I'm going to use it to kill 1 Signy later in the game. Identifying that early on is really important to making sure that your game plan goes accordingly.
Yeah, it makes sense. Also, you talked about real quick about the idea of like knowing when to use your spells early. Lalaru also adds a wrinkle into that, right? Can you talk about that a bit?
Definitely. Yeah, I'd say honestly, if there's one change I'd make, it'd be maybe trying to find space for a second Lalaru over the Carnival. Carnival's a good card, but I think Lalaru is a very powerful card in this format specifically because we have all of these what people are calling rainbow decks, where because Desona doesn't really care about color and cares more about the Desona tag, a lot of decks have 3, 4, or even 5 different colors of Signy in their main deck, and Lalaru is able to really punish the greedy decks, especially in a format with a lot of Revise and Invisible, because a lot of decks are running the bare minimum amount of green in order to support Mel Invisible, and Lalaru can be an extra way to punish early. A lot of decks are thinking, I need 3 green so that I can avoid getting double levited, but Lalaru gives you that extra little bit that can punish players for being greedy with that color.
Yeah, that is one of the benefits too about running this type of Piruluk is that you actually have more green in this deck than most people have in their green-based decks.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say probably the most unique thing about my deck actually, and I think a lot of people that maybe saw like Tetris's video on Hellfire's channel would be surprised mostly by the black aura more than anything. But honestly, I think the card that actually was the most unique to my deck was Ivy, which is mind blowing because I think that card's really good. But it just goes to show how little space there is in this deck. But what I realized is like, I think most Pure League players have kind of gone to the rhythm of saving their Enter early and using Revise as a way to provide for their early turns and early like anytime you need to cast a spell or use like a Wobble early on, you use Revise for that. But what I realized is that because practically every deck in the format is playing some sort of Enter Burn, you really cannot be using Revise before like earlier than you have to. Like you really want to save it for as long as possible. And Ivy just enables that by giving you that extra little bit of Enter on turn 3 to be able to save a Revise for after the Crossfire turn.
All right, cool. I think we got a pretty good dive into what your deck functions.
No, I guess sorry, I should talk about the Black Aura a little bit.
Yeah, talk about the Black Aura.
Because I do think that is a standout card that I know a lot of other Piruluk players have looked at, but the way I describe it these days, and I don't know if I ever described it to any of you, but it literally just turns you into Nanashi. Like if you think about Nanashi's ability to say, if I have 3 to Sona on the field, I'm going to minus 3k something on your field. And you have other big things, so I'm not going to worry about those. I'm just going to kill that one thing. That's literally what Black Aura does for this deck. It turns Piruluk into Nanashi, and it's so powerful. It is honestly, as soon as Black Aura is in my trash, I'm feeling like 10 times better about the game because I get a free vanish that doesn't cost me any cards every single turn, and especially paired with the amount of discard that is in the deck because of cards like Unrest and Pond Turtle and Extra. Your opponent's ability to like have choice in Signy isn't very high, and they're going to get punished for not being able to field big Signy on every Signy lane. And so because of that, I think like if you're going to build a deck, honestly, more than any other spell, keep one copy of Black Aura in the deck. Exactly one, just one, no more, but one copy.
I do think one copy of Black Aura sort of changes the game, right? Like there are times where like I think you can go after greedy Enter with the Piruluk player, but as soon as the Black Aura is a part of the equation, it's like, well, not really anymore. Like I have to potentially snipe a few things, but I can't overall punish.
Yep.
All right, cool. Rudy, do you have anything else to talk about this deck? Any other tips that you'd like to give, or any other shout-outs that you'd like to give for the Piruluk stuffs?
I want to give a shout-out to Tetris because I'm pretty sure his idea... Well, it was really through Scob, who helped a lot. And he helped me a lot with last GP, too. He was the one that recommended, like, Innocent Battle for last GP, which was best card like in the whole meta. But yeah, Scob said that Tetris was running Black Aura on his list, and also he said that Tetris was claiming to be the only good Piruluk in North America. And I was like, at first I was like, that's silly. Black Aura seems really bad. But then I started testing with it, and it was like, this is like the best spell in the deck. And it's literally only good in Piruluk. Like it is not very good in any other deck, but in exactly Piruluk, it is a very, very, very good card.
Yeah, totally. All right, cool. That's the Piruluk deck talked about. Use Chibis, I think, right, for your
yeah. In fact, I was trying to find. I had a Congrats Alice that I had just won at some point, and Pigeon lent me a Congrats Mel, so. I was looking around for a Congrats X, but it's that was way like very early in the game's lifespan, before our time, and so I wasn't like looking that hard, but I didn't end up finding one, so I ended up using only the Chibi X that I got as a free promo from the last GP when they were giving away DXM Chibis for free. So, but yeah, I ended up bringing the Chibis because I was just like matching Elrigs is pretty nice, and I'm not gonna be able to find an X Sleepy, that's for sure. So
yeah, totally. All right, cool.
The
who wants to go next, Emmy or Taylor? Your choice.
I can go.
All right, cool.
That's cool.
Let's do it. So we've got Mayu Tama.
Oh yes.
Talk to me about it. Why did you decide Mayu Tama was the one to bring to GP?
So that is a kind of a long story, but cut short, I knew like the moment that Black Tama was getting announced and coming out in Desona, I was like, this is what I'm going to be playing moving forward. And first of all, thank you, Emmy, for helping me acquire the Tama UR. That kind of solidified that and was like, well, I have to play it, and I can't play anything else. So yeah, I mean, at the beginning of like Dissonance, I was trying different builds, and I had kind of stuck on the Sunspot Tama for like the longest time, and I really like that build. It feels very strong, especially like playing, I mean, Exia in a deck. Like Exia is still a good card, even though like Bing's around. Like it still can win you games. But I think over time, like testing that deck and then kind of even playing it in the Kumi Cup, which was like an event that happened before the GP online, I just got like train wrecked by like Virtual Ange and like just basically like every game I played just didn't turn out well with that.
So
And I had
you're
tried
telling me
like
you finally got your grudge match back against Virtual on.
oh yeah. It's because of me taking Sosh and counterplaying it at the first GP or the second GP.
Yeah.
Um, but whenever before Dishonored came out, I had tried Tamamayu, and I was like, I thought it was pretty good, but I wasn't fully sold on the idea of like throwing your inner and your hand away just to get like an extra turn that you only have one Signy attack on. Like it seemed very not great. But after Sunspot wasn't working out, I was like, I'll give it another go and like try some things. And at first, like there were definitely things about it that didn't seem very strong. There was like a lot of struggles I still was have, or I was still having against decks like Midorico specifically, or anything that could find their way around Machina Bind that I know a lot of decks run. So it was kind of a struggle at first to kind of get the list down on what would work. And even I think like 2 weeks before, and I'm sure Emmy remembers, I kept asking like, "You feel like this is that good? Like, are you sure this is good? Like, am I crazy?" And it wasn't until finally, I think it was Scob, and I think even Rue was like, "Have you tried Earth Aura?" And I was like, "Oh, I'll maybe give it a go and see what I think." And like that completely changed the entire deck, and it like made it so much more consistent, surprisingly. And it was like, all right, like this, I actually feel good enough about this. I have like one really hard decision to make, and that's when do I do Unknown Memory, or not Unknown Memory, Mysterious Rendezvous. Sorry, they changed the name up on me. So it's like, other than that decision, like this is a deck that I feel pretty confident in doing like over and over and over and over again in a GP setting. So
Yeah.
we ended up taking it.
I think this is probably the GP
Oh.
Urith Aura is going to be at its best, right? Like,
Mm.
it is insane because like Urith Aura's like lack of utility past turn 3 or 4 is like its glaring weakness. But this game at that GP didn't ever really last past turn 3 or 4, and you were playing the deck that also would make sure it didn't last past 3 or 4. So
Yeah.
so it did feel like it's like funny whenever I would play against a Mayu Tama, I would see the Machina on the side of the field and be like, I've got this. This is fine. There's no way they can cast everything they want. There's no way they can use all the enter they want with Tama and also then still have a leftovers for binds. So when you started playing with Aura, it was just like, oh yeah, this isn't a thing I can even do anymore.
Oh yeah, and it felt really refreshing too, because not only like with Sunspot, like when I was practicing that, like I felt like I was constantly getting punished for getting the barriers. Like it's just a damage that you don't get any enter from. It prevents you from hitting cloth, which is great, but like it's easy to like have someone play that and then, or you play that and then someone just be like, all right, well, I'm assuming you're going to use Machina potentially, or Madoka, which is my other assist. And it's like, well, I'm just going to throw Love It down and burn you anyway. And now you're not going to get like any enter. You're going to, neg enter. So it like, that was like going the aura route over the bind. Like it was just like, okay, cool. Like I'm going to get 2 more cloth and you're going to hit me and I'm going to get 2 enter out of it. And now I'm just going to make my turn 4 to rendezvous like so much easier to do. So it definitely like turned out a lot.
Yeah. So give me the overall breakdown of the deck. Like, what are you looking to do in terms of like your turns, your game plan? What are you trying to aim for? Like for someone who's interested in playing this, they want to play edgy Tama, like, and they've never done it before. What should they do?
I think the first thing is you have to put on some Welcome to the Black Parade by My Chemical Romance to kind of get yourself in the headspace.
Yeah.
But as with most Persona decks, it's like the early game is very similar. You're like opening lanes, especially with Musica. Musica kind of becomes like your hole opener in a lot of the early games. I like Firecracker. I think it's a great way to like open holes, but I kind of like saving those for turn 2 if I can. And then one thing that I always thought was a little cheeky is like I like to throw them in my trash to hopefully grab them off of like the emergence burst or anything, like in case it happens, because it happens a lot and it feels really good. But I think like the main thing with this deck is you're looking to open holes, but there's like a little bit of math that goes into getting the right amount of damage to secure the Mayu turn. And the best way to do that is just getting the mill out at a good time. I mean, because like Mayutama, it is a dash deck, like you are doing a lot of damage, but you have to refresh or like it gets a little iffy on if you're gonna kill them or not. So like one thing is like the Mahu Mahos are very important getting them out. That's where also Earth very much did come into play there too, with kind of just pushing that over the edge a little bit. And then like my favorite thing to do on turn 3 to secure that mill was going into Aura, Alfou to Sona, and then trashing it off of the Aura to then mill them 4. And then, if you've already swung like an Arisal, you've now milled them 10 in one turn, and you've got 2 life cloth, which is really cute. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of that. And then once you hit the turn that you're going to Mayu, you have Tama's OPG, which just makes it's a little bit of a mental game of like, all right, like I have this puzzle in front of me. This is the Signy that's on the opponent's field. I need to now piece together like, what do I grab from trash and field that's going to get me to that amount of damage or those holes that I need opened correctly, whether that be, I'm putting an Alfou down, I'm downing 2 up, then I'm doing -5, and then we're dropping a Destro, and that's going to do the last -3 to that, what is it, to that Kago Mecha to like vanish that at the beginning of my attack phase, or, do I need to pull a Levitt out and so on. So there's a lot of utility there that really like, I think kind of pushes you to the point for the Mayu on that turn as well, just to kind of be like, all right, this is secured, and it's time to just kind of punch through and hope they don't grab a servant, like might happen at the end of the turn.
Yeah. And so I mean, it's cool that you mentioned that too. That's the puzzle piece turn, right? And you mentioned Love It is a good way to kill an enter, so that way you can get past like a 3-stop and make it a 1-stop or something, right? And then the Alpha or the Rizal as a way to mill, and then obviously Destro as a way to just finish opening up lanes. But you've got a couple other options here too that I'd love to hear your opinions on. One of the more interesting ones that people wouldn't necessarily expect is, I think Pale Lady is a pretty good choice too, right?
Oh yeah. It's kind of funny because a lot of turns, especially, and I can thank Emmy for the practice on this, but like anytime there's an Exia on board, you have to decide like, all right, do I maybe go Mayu and blank everything and then like use unknown memory to like clear a lane and just know I'm not swinging through the Exia lane? Or do I just do the smart play and play something like Palebi or even Destro, target the Exia, get it out of the way, and then just know what lanes I'm able to swing in? It definitely is helped a lot, like in kind of like piecing out that of like, if I can't swing in this lane, that's cool. I'll just Tama once per turn, open the other lane, and then throw a bang in there, clear that other one, and we're good.
Yeah, and Matcha ends up being also a way to do that too with its freeze targeting.
Oh yeah.
So then you got 2 bang here. That's also an Exia counter. Is it any good for anything else?
Oh yeah, I think I mean mostly for Exia specifically. But I mean it does come and play with a lot of like bigger things that you're unable to hit me. A 13k like Anna Mirage or anything that you kind of need to, that's above 10k, it's definitely helpful there. It's also cool too, like being able, I guess, like with Tama's once per turn and then having these options of like basically like Love It and paying to Sona Signy from your inner to just kind of open that other hole. It definitely makes kind of that kill turn a lot easier in trying to decide that. Plus, I mean, it's a Shadow level 3 on both turns if you have the inner for it, which means like you swing in with that last, and if they hit an Exia burst on anything else, they can't target your bank, so your bank stays on the field, which is a great way to secure damage during the game.
Yeah, certainly. And then the last one here is you've got a Piruluk to Sona as well.
I do. That one did me a whole lot of nothing during the GP, but it in a lot of my practice games, if I knew they were down on hand size or something like that, I mean, it is very useful. There were surprisingly a lot of Miko games that I had just in like testing before GP, where like on their turn 3, you have the option of, are you discarding or am I drawing? And like a couple times, I'm just like, how many cards do you have? And they're like, oh, I have 2, surprisingly. And I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I'll discard my hand and keep you with those 2 that you have in your hand. And I'm gonna hopefully maybe see if Piruluk can do a little magic here with the Madoka Dub and kind of see where we end up at the end of the game.
Yeah, I think with Madoka Dub too, you actually have a surprisingly good chance to at least snipe one guard, right? And sniping one guard is positive 1 damage, which is what this deck wants anyways. Cool. All right. So do you have any other? I think you probably covered all the tips that you'd want to give for this type of deck, unless you have any other ones that you think of off the top of your head.
Nothing off the top of my head. I mean, I think the one thing that I'll say you have to watch out for, which is the main thing that I learned in testing is one, Umar clear. You have to watch out for that because if Tama gets frozen and you haven't aura'd, it's just game over. You just lose. You lose. Same with the Miko fan freezing your Elrig. Like anytime it was against Miko or I saw Umar hit, I was like, all right, so immediately turn 2, we're just going aura and just getting this out of the race so I just don't lose. I think that's one thing you have to watch out for. But other than that,
it's worth adding. Sorry, it's just worth adding that because we're going into Fasane. There's a card coming out called Chaos, or it could be called something else in English. But that card prevents you from moving cards from your trash to other zones when your opponent plays it during your main phase and attack phase. If you're playing this kind of style of deck, any deck with Earth Aura, you have to be aware that that card exists, and you might have to aura earlier than you want to, or just be locked out of it for the crucial turns where you need it the most.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true too for Tama's OPG as well, to make sure that you can field the board there. So if you need to do it early, it's definitely worth doing. True with like getting milled out too. Nanashi, it's like not as scary because it's like a constant mill. So even after you refresh, you'll probably end up with more cards in your trash. But going into the next deck, which is Alfou, that was a struggle I had to overcome many times in practicing of like trying to figure out like, all right, is he gonna mill me out this next turn? Am I safe? I'm not safe. I need to just get it out of the way now if I can. So
cool.
And then if I don't mind just pitching in here, something that, because we definitely did do a lot of practice games, and there was definitely one thing that I think is kind of like interesting to touch on is, especially for Tama Mayu, the difference between going first and going second, because you can almost like kind of play it completely differently.
It's so true. Oh, going like, it's funny because even like at top tables, like against Brandon, who won the GP, I like looked over at Root and I was like, I think I go second, right? I was like, because it's easier for me. And like, right before I said that, Brandon was like, oh, I think I lose if you go first. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm like, because like if I go second, like typically it just becomes a little bit easier to make decisions. Like versus when you go first, you don't get that like extra damage in, and then you have that turn 4 where it's like, okay, typically I rendezvous here, but I missed that first turn of damage, so I'm like, maybe I don't, and I like wait one more turn. And so going second, I feel like is still correct, but I also lost that game, so maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm not sure.
Yeah. All right, cool. Taylor, is there any other rounds that you want to shout out specifically, or any people you want to shout out about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think like I feel like every round was pretty tight. I will say like the one round that I definitely was very nervous about was the one I had against Tiffany specifically. Like I had practiced like Hanayo a little bit against Tama Sunspot, but I don't think I had any practice on Tama Mayu. And so going into that match, I was like, oh shit, like I know this matchup, but I don't know like this matchup. So that was very scary, kind of going through it and thinking through like, okay, I think I know what's gonna happen, but maybe I was like, I don't know what Tiffany's cooked up in this build, so like maybe I'm totally wrong. I don't know. So that was very scary. And then of course like Burst Rush Anj is terrifying. I think I got very lucky on one match, which was my first one where I think I did get Fur and Slash, I think off of the Burst Rush, but thankfully I also hit like I think 2 or 3 Destro bursts, so that kind of like just skyrocketed the game for me a little bit. So, but yeah, other than that, like they were all great games.
Cool. All right, Emmy, let's get it. It's your time. It's your time to shine. Let's talk about Alfou.
Ooh,
I think
let's
was
talk about
the,
Alfou,
the
all
yeah
right.
the dark horse of the top 8. I think for sure.
Yeah, it was really cool seeing how people were like considering, oh, who's that like rogue Alpha in the top 8? Because I was coming into it and I always thought, especially because I looked at like the GP6, which was the P14 meta. So it was even a meta after this where chaos existed that Alpha was still able to succeed. And I was like, okay, so I know that this deck can work. I know it can do well at a big event like this. And it's like, so in the learning process, it was like, what exactly about it makes it work? And the more I played it, the more I thought about it, I was like, I feel like this is really the format where this Larig can shine, especially because it's Desona and Alpha's OPG is very unique in the fact that it exiles 3 cards. And so it was like, that makes every matchup really unique. And how to kind of play them is like you can kind of play the styles similar, but you have to really know your opponent's game plan and what their win con is, especially when you get to like your turn 3, your turn 4. And that was really what made the whole deck fun. I feel like I could talk about this whole list for like an hour alone. I had so much fun with it. It was like probably by far my most favorite deck I've played. It was like I've joked around with these guys. It was like I started having more fun in this meta the more Exias I added to my deck, which is crazy to think about, but it was like true. I was having so much fun playing this and practicing it that I like the closer it got to GP, I was like, you know what? This is real. Like this deck is good. I was especially like during all of the P12 era, I never would have thought I would be playing Alpha. Like not a single time. Like if you asked me like a month before the event if I would be playing Alpha, I'm just be like, what's Alpha? Like I don't know. But it was a kind of a crazy start, but definitely it was like the more I practiced it, the more nuance I was able to find, and that was how I was able to like kind of say, "Oh, every card in this deck has a purpose." And I did steal it. I just stole the whole list, and it was like I felt like everything worked. If like you were asking me about something to change, like I could mention like, yeah, maybe this, but like when you think about it, every card has a purpose, especially in this format. I felt like it was really like a strong deck. Like I could argue that it would be among close to like a top 5 deck in the whole format. And it was like no one was playing it. I was the only Alpha there. But I felt like its matchups into the top 3 Larigs, like the Nanashi, Piruluk, and Miko Miko, were all like very strong compared to the other like top 3 decks in itself. Like they didn't have as good of matchups into the other 2 as I would say Alpha might into those 3. And so that was why I kind of like thought, oh yeah, I could like actually perform on this, and it's not just like a random P11 deck that just happens to work with a Desona main deck.
Well, and I think there's also something to be said too about like some of the rogue factor of it too. Like your opponents,
Yeah.
unless they knew what they're up against, they don't really know what they're up against on this.
Yeah, I was like, I know that Wilson talked during your interview about like, oh yeah, you like practiced against this exact list before, so he knew to like hide his stuff in his enter, which is like really important,
Mhm.
especially when I can sort of choose when to refresh you, in a sense, after my turn 3 is like I can say when is my opponent's trash the most important to them, and then be able to decide to get rid of it. So being able to hide things in enter is something that is hard for me to get around, but I can get back a little bit to that later when we start going through some more cards. But that was like definitely a big part of it. Like people were saying, "Oh, what does that card do again?" And that definitely helped a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as the Elric deck goes, I think everyone's very understanding of Xenocluster, very understanding of Instigate, very powerful stuff, especially paired with your Alpha, as well as, the classic Mel Revise and Mel Invisible that pretty much everyone was running. But then out of nowhere, here's a new Mirror Clear. This is it.
Yeah. Is like out of everything in my deck, when I was like first starting playing the deck, I was like, Umar Clear feels really weird because it's the only thing in my deck that triggers Xenocluster if I play it during my main phase, which is typically when I would play it, because I would want to freeze my opponent's Lyrig. Because if I played it during their turn, I would just like pay and enter just for them not to attack. And it's like, okay, otherwise I could have like guarded that attack maybe, and now I'm at a situation where I don't actually like stop a damage in compared to main phase. So I was like, why would I really want to play Umar Clear if they're now drawing 3 cards after I just made them discard and draw 1 less? It like didn't make much sense until I like played it more and I thought about it. I was like, Alfou in particular really wants to say, I'm gonna get rid of what's in your hand and you're not getting it back. So it was like, even when I had the opportunity, if like my opponent had, let's say like 10 cards in their deck, and Alpha OPG mills 8, and they have, let's say, 6 cards in their hand. So what you could do is you could say, oh, I'll Alpha OPG to mill 8. They would have 2 cards left. They would have 6 cards in your hand. So it seems really good to be able to, oh, I'm going to Umar Clear now, so that they draw, only have 2 cards. And then it's like, okay, now they just Xenocluster and they're back up to 5. That's where they would have been anyway. So there's that process where it's like, okay, now instead, what if I Umar Clear first? Then I get rid of everything that they wanted in their hand, which I can now get rid of from the game, which is not something another Lyrig can do. And so that was what I definitely found being especially helpful. So like, I don't think I Umar cleared a single time during the whole GP to like actually refresh them. So definitely really interesting things that I learned throughout my whole process in playtesting and even at the GP. I feel like I learned a lot being able to play against a lot of different things and knowing what my opponents wanted to do.
All right. Well, you said everything in your deck had a function. Let's run it through. You got quite a bit of cards in here. The first one you said you had more fun the more Exia you played. Talk to me about Exia. I think you were the only one who brought an Exia to the top tables.
I was, and I brought 4 of them. Like, wow, what a good card! But no, for real, like the whole deck is built around Exia in a sense. It was like, it's crazy. Like, I'm running a Dissona deck, but the deck's built around Exia, right? It kind of sounds counterintuitive, but when you really think about it, Dissona can open holes better than almost any sort of like deck, especially with Alpha, that you could play. Like, there's the virtual build that was successful during GP2, which was like, oh yeah, you refresh them once, and then you're able to get the refresh again. So it's like you're playing a 5 to 7 clock game, but this deck feels so strong because when everyone is in the Dissona, like I only played like maybe just one non-Dissona deck through the entire event. This felt a lot stronger versus that, because as soon as I got to turn 3, Exia gets online. I want to play almost as many Exias as I can because I know that I can get rid of all the counters to it, or at least as many as I can. Obviously, I can't always get rid of their counters, but it definitely, Exia works in this deck because I'm playing Alpha, which is really cool.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is tell me if this is a common play. You Umir to shred their hand, then you do the Alpha to refresh, and you go, how many bang you got? And they've got 2, and you go, cool, I'll take 2 of those bang and then something else, right? Is that the common play there?
Yeah, you got it. As much as I can, for sure. The idea is because it's really interesting how you deal with limit in this deck too, because I was like, do I really want to Umar clear if I have a servant in my hand? It's like, yeah, I get an extra turn, but like I'm also going through my deck a little bit more too, and it's like, this might be my last time I would have a servant. So it's like really interesting wanting to try to Umar clear first and then hope to draw into something. But it's like I have 6 limit before I Umar clear. And then I do want to Alpha OPG after that. But is like I don't exactly know what I'm going to hit with the mill eight. I can see one bang in their trash. I'm hoping to get two because most decks run two. So it's like I'd play Exias. If I have two Exias, cool. If I have one Exia, cool. And then I would Umer clear to get to the 7 limit, hope to draw into another good level 3 and a level 1 because I'm on 20 level 1s. Then I would be able to sort of like really slow the game down a lot after I OPG and get rid of their bangs. I guess I should also probably go over just like the hierarchy of targets for Alpha because I feel like I played a little against Alpha in the GP2 format in the CPO1, and it felt like the Alpha OPG was like, it was a nice touch, but it was more built around being able to just mill you twice with virtuals was kind of more of the idea of it. But this deck is like, you have to hit the correct targets with your OPG, and like even then is like still a RNG game. Like you can't get rid of everything with your OPG that could lose you the game. And so I would say bang is like obviously at your top. The reason you run Exia is to get rid of the bang and then they don't have as many counters towards it. And then after that is like basically all the removal. So Love It is still a strong choice because even when you have Exias, your opponent will be able to still open holes because it's like target one, Love It the other. Like Love It the open hole or whatever. And so getting rid of just their removal in general is a lot stronger than getting rid of their defensive pieces. It is like, so I've played against you, for example, and it was like, okay, turn 3, I get rid of all your Miko fans, but it's still, the game is like really close because you're still dealing a lot of damage. It's like Miko fan is a big part of your game plan, but I lose because you deal more damage to me. And I like kind of make it on like a clock, whereas like, I'm going to win on turn 5. If you don't kill me on turn 4, I'm going to kill you on turn 5. And like that's why I have so many like level 1s that deal damage in this deck.
You do actually have quite a bit. I see you've got 6 plus 4, so yeah, huge amount, 10, right?
Yeah, I mean, I am running black, so I do need the black count for like the 4 Musicas. I think like Taylor, for example, he was on a lot of Musicas in his Tama. It was like all the black Lyrigs typically ran at least 3 of them. But I still wanted to get some Wawolf and Firecrackers in there for just any matchup in general. Trying to hit as many things level 1 and 2 as possible was really important to the structure of the deck. And then it was like turn 3 is just my game plan completely shifts into playing a lot more defensively, doing less damage a turn, but being able to have the instigate to fill my field with whatever I need to. And then just being able to say, okay, I have like 1 or 2 Exias on the board, but I'm still able to try to open lanes otherwise. And then that's how I like kind of just like say, yeah, I'm winning the game on turn 5 because I still can clear your board even with playing Exia, and I really force you to have to try to figure out a way to kill me before that happens.
Cool. So what were some of the other roles that you have? You have a bunch of like one-ups here. What roles do those one-ups fill?
I mean, like, so when you're playing a deck that like runs Instigate or like Tama, like you know you can run a few more one-ups than other decks. Like the Umer's there just as a little bit more being able to do cheaper damage than Love It, because that came up in some games where it's like, okay, against Miko is like, you don't necessarily always need to have a Love It versus a Umer, because Umer costs 1 less enter, and it can still hit through their Miko fans. But is like, Umer's just fine. It's like another level 3 that can do damage. And then I think the more interesting one of is Guzuko, because like Alpha is also there. It's like Alpha is a good one to hit like 5Ks or like bring a Kagomeka down to a Musico range or whatever. I didn't really use the Alpha for the mill all that much because I'm only going for 1 refresh a game, and I can get that anyway. But that's what Alpha was there just for that. But the interesting one of I think is Guzuko because that was like one of the cards that I was testing. I was like, is this card actually good? Because it was like, yeah, you can say it's a defensive piece, but when you play it, they just target it before they remove anything. Then you just mill one for free, and it's like, okay, yay me, I just milled one. But I think the actual interesting thing comes in the enter effect mostly is like it sounds expensive. You pay a black and two colorless to vanish target Signy. But I run 6 non-servant cards that aren't Desona. The only way to actually use Amoeba and Exia in my enter is through Umar Clear or Mel or Guzuko. So Guzuko is kind of like one of my only enter sinks for Exia and Amoeba. So sometimes I would actually be able to win games off of instigate to grab a Guzuko to be able to use my dead cards in my enter to actually clear a lane to win the game. And so that's a really fun one that I had.
I think we can also say that Guzuko's Life Burst is a fill a field effect, and like fill a
Yeah,
field
it's
effects
great.
are insane in
Yep.
this meta.
Yep. Like I'm on 3 Kagomeka, 1 Guzuko, 3 Immersions, 2 Amoeba. Like I'm on cards that can put Signy on the field with life bursts. And I think it's like in this deck in particular, it's like even more useful because almost every other deck is like they're on Modica, they're on X Crossfire, like those stop Signy from doing damage. My deck doesn't do that. And so if my opponent opens 3 on turns like 2 and 3, for example, I'm not going to be able to say, oh yeah, I'm gonna like down this or I'm gonna like clear that lane with X. And so I can really get lucky more so than some other decks. Like it can be a lot more punishing when I hit a life burst compared to others.
Yeah,
too.
that makes sense to me. Cool. I think we've gone pretty in depth about how Alpha functions. Is there anything else you wanted to make shout outs for your rounds or any last tips that you can think of or any shout outs in general that you want to give?
Yeah, my opponents were all awesome. This tournament really made me feel it was like, wow, I never thought I would actually like be at the top tables like this. I never thought I would like actually be playing the players that I played. And so it was like all my games were like super fun too. It was like my round 5, I want to say, versus like Teppers, I think is his name. I hope I didn't just completely ruin it. But he was playing the Ush Lion that also popped up at a GP. And I was like, man, I looked at this list like once and I'm like, I should have paid more attention to it. It was a crazy game. I had so much fun. It was like when I Umar cleared, it was like turn 5 because I had 3 servants in my hand, but he was never swinging with Lion because I knew I had those 3 servants in my hand. So when I finally Umar cleared, I discarded 4 cards and 3 of them were a servant. I've like never done that before. So it was a lot of fun. And then I want to give a shout out to Chair too. He was my round 7. That was a lot of fun. It was crazy how he was able to have 3 Hedonyms and a bang in his enter when I like wanted to mill him out. I'm like, I wanted to hit the Hedonyms, I wanted to hit the bangs. I can't do that. So he played that really well.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to that because like I also probably should have given a shout out to Chair. I think Chair only got 3rd, but like honestly, like I think this was the best I have ever seen him, and he's a very good player, so that's like saying a lot. I think the game I had against him in top 8 was the most competitive game of Wixoss I have ever played. Like, serious, like, dude, that was his event. Even though he didn't win, that was easily the best I've ever seen Chair, and I'm really excited to see what he looks like in Dallas. Like, out of any player, that's the player I'm most excited for.
Yeah, me too, actually. I'm excited to see everyone at Dallas as well as you guys again, hopefully. So yeah, pretty excited for that one. Well, thanks guys again for coming to be at this 2-parter. jam-packed content. Thrilled to test with you guys. Thrilled to test with you guys more in the future. So thank you guys. Any last shout outs that you want to give at all before we end this episode? Or we got them all out of the way.
Shout outs to Pigeon, who messaged me after every single round. I think I would have actually died if you weren't there talking shit about. And this is nothing to do with Wilson, but just talking shit about Burst Rush Arms like as a deck. I think I would have like gone to the bathroom and cried if he wasn't also helping me vent about it.
Yeah. Pigeon often knew the winners of the round. I remember I finished a round and I got a text from, or like a Discord message from him. I was like, it's been seconds. I haven't even told these guys what's going on. Go ahead, Taylor. I interrupted you.
I was gonna say, I think one big shout out I have to give is like everyone in the North Carolina server, which includes like I mean the people who got me into Wixoss, like just in general, but also like, you know, the Alcadillan and his crew from like I think they're in Alabama, and like just it's cool to like kind of see like when I was invited to the NC server, it was North Carolina, like it's like, you know, we see each other every week, whatever. And it's like it really has grown to be like a sweaty, try hard like server of like us just like every Friday night like gaming and like stuff. So shout out to them, and then yeah, I mean shout out to you guys too for like, I mean, I don't know, it's just so cool to like finally see everyone and meet everyone in person. But yeah.
And then I want to shout out Pigeon, Bubble Person, the people who couldn't make it, because that was the reason that I was able to go with you guys. And I hope that Taylor and I were good enough substitutes for them. So
clearly, you guys were a top 8.
Wait.
Yeah.
Shout out Jimmy's mom. Awesome.
Shout out Jimmy's mom.
Shout out Jimmy's mom.
Holy shit.
There's more on that last episode, but yes.
Yeah, of course. And then, much like Taylor, I want to give a huge shout out to North Carolina, because I live in Iowa. Like, I'm the only person from this whole state that I think plays this game. And so when I was first getting into it, they were like super open. Just the whole Wixoss community in general has been super open. So like I was like, one of my first like 3 games I played was with Pigeon, and I was like, I had no idea who Pigeon was at the time. But then it was like more and more I find out like, wow, like this a good of a guy as he is like playing with scrubs like me who started the game a week ago. The whole community in general has been super cool. But in general, a few people I want to shout out are Taylor. He's like probably been my best friend like throughout this whole process. He was the reason I joined North Carolina, and I don't think I would be here without him. Patrick, P. Smith, for being like the person in charge of a lot of the things that happen in North Carolina, being one of the first people that really like started trying to get us a little bit more like out there. And we really started trying because he like had the idea to like do the Friday tournaments, and is like, I always try to join them when I can. They're super fun. And then Alice for being my friend. She was the very first person I played, and is like now I still good friends with her. And then of course Rue, Pigeon, them, everyone from the Burst Stiff crew helped me train. And then I do got a shout out, because while I do live in a state where no one else plays the game, I do have a locals that I drive 2.5 hours for. All the people from Lincoln, somehow there's like 8 of us that show up to these events. Like, don't ask me how, apparently in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest where you get 8 people. So huge shout out to all of them. My locals are amazing, best people in the market, super invested in Wixoss, and gonna keep on trying to do more with that too. And so they also like push me and continue to really try to like be the best I can.
Cool.
You have one more person to shout out that
Do
I
it.
forgot about. Matt Chops, thank you for being my support person through both GPs. Literally after every round. Like
Matt, I think we hugged like every round.
He's the sweetest and nicest person, and like every game I'm like oh. He's like, how'd you do? I'm like, I did good, and we're both like, woo! Like, all right, good luck, you got this. He's so nice. And, oh.
Matt was more invested in my early rounds than I was.
Yeah, Matt was there for
Love
me during
him.
my
Love
lowest,
him
and it
so
was
much.
like he was always there to help
so
whenever I
sweet.
needed. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's a sweet guy. All right, guys, that's it. That's the end. That's the end of this episode. So this is where everyone clicks off the video. So I hope everyone flips future life bursts, and we'll see you at Dallas. Bye, everybody.
Bye.